13. I'm 84. I spent my first week as an Amish wife behind one closed door. The door has a thumb-sized dent beside the latch, dark where years of hands have missed the iron and struck the pine instead. I keep staring at it because the room is cold, my palms are wet, and John is standing behind me without saying my name. Outside, a buggy wheel clicks once every turn. Inside, the lamp flame bends. I can smell lye soap on my sleeves and damp wool from his coat, and the quilt under my fingers feels rough where one red patch has been mended with blue thread. That thread is what I remember most. Not the prayer downstairs, not his mother carrying away the last plate. The blue thread. John slides the bolt. It makes a soft sound. That's the thing nobody tells you. The quiet sounds stay the longest. He keeps rubbing the seam of his left cuff, and I keep waiting for him to explain what a wife is meant to know after the door closes, because surely someone has explained it to him. No one has. I know I'm supposed to obey. I know I'm not supposed to ask. I know the women downstairs hear the floorboard near the bed complain, then go still. I remember it's Thursday. No, wait, Friday. The bread was baked that morning. John whispers, "Sarah, I think..." Then he stops. So do I. I'm 19 years old, and this is my first week as a wife. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and lets me keep telling them. Tell me in comments, what were you expected to know without being taught? And if you want to go further, a super chat or membership says these voices are worth hearing. Now, back to what happened. What happened in that room didn't begin with John sliding the bolt. It began years before, in every lowered voice and every sentence that ended when a girl walked through the doorway. Among us, marriage was spoken of as a duty, blessed by God and guarded by the Ordnung, the set of rules that shaped everything from the width of a hat brim to the way a wife answered her husband. Nobody sat me down and said my body would stop belonging to me after the wedding. They didn't have to. I watched women step aside when men entered. I watched Mama serve herself last from the blue-speckled bowl, even when she was carrying my youngest brother and her ankles were swollen over her shoes. The shocking part, looking back, is that I could name every kind of thread in a quilt before I was 12. But not one part of myself without shame. That's the thing nobody tells you. Silence can teach a lesson just as well as words. The rule lived in little things. It lived in Aunt Miriam pressing 2 fingers to her lips when Cousin Ruth asked why a married woman had cried through Sunday singing. It lived in the way women laughed too loudly whenever someone said a bride looked tired, as though tiredness were a joke all wives were meant to understand. Once, when I was 15, I asked Mama what happened after a wedding supper. She was peeling apples with the short knife that had a crack in its bone handle, and the peel broke cleanly in her lap. She didn't look at me. She only said, "A good wife trusts." Then she handed me another apple. I nearly asked what trust meant when you were afraid, but Ruth had been sent to stay with an aunt for asking too many questions that spring, and I had seen the empty hook where her black bonnet used to hang. Nobody threatened me. Nobody needed to. I swallowed the question, and 4 years later I carried it upstairs with me. 3 weeks before the wedding, my older sister Anna pulled me behind the wash house while rain ticked against the tin roof. She was 26 and already had 4 children, though the youngest still slept in a wooden drawer beside her bed, because there wasn't room for another cradle. Anna said 11 words. I counted them afterward because I thought I had missed something. Don't fight him. Be still. It gets easier after a while. Then she rubbed my wrist with her thumb and looked toward the house, where Mama was beating mud from a rug with a willow switch. I asked, "What does he do?" Anna's mouth opened, but the bell over the back door rang and she said, "You'll know." That was my preparation. John's was no better. His father told him to pray, be firm, and never speak of private matters. Two young people were sent toward a locked door with less knowledge than we had about calming a frightened horse. John and I had met at a Sunday singing in Bishop Levi's barn, under rafters blackened by 40 winters of lantern smoke. He wasn't bold. That's what I liked about him. While the other boys joked near the cider jugs, he fixed the loose peg on my bench with his pocket knife and brushed the shavings into his own palm so they wouldn't catch on my dress. He brought my little brother Samuel a smooth chestnut once because Samuel collected things shaped like hearts. And when my mare went lame on the road home, John walked beside her for nearly 3 miles, his right hand resting lightly on the harness so she wouldn't startle. I loved him. I think I loved him. I don't know if either of us knew what love was beyond kindness and choosing the same person again. He was 23. No, 24. I always get that wrong. He had turned 24 after planting, when the lilacs were already brown. The days before the wedding were filled with work, which was how our women handled fear. We baked 12 loaves, rolled noodles over the scarred oak table, and aired quilts that smelled of cedar chips and winter dust. Married women came and went, carrying jars, chairs, folded cloth, anything except an honest sentence. Aunt Miriam told me to keep the lamp low. Sarah Yoder said I should wear the white nightdress with the narrow cuffs because men like clean things, then blushed so hard the tips of her ears went pink. Nobody told me I could speak if I hurt. Nobody told me John might be frightened too. Nobody told either of us that tenderness wasn't something you guessed correctly on the first try. On Friday evening, after the last buggy had rolled away, Mama placed a cup of peppermint tea in my hands. The cup had a chip shaped like a tooth. She kissed my forehead, whispered, "Be good," and left me at the foot of the stairs. The room was smaller than it had seemed when Anna and I papered it the week before. The lamplight made the cream walls look yellow, and one corner of the ceiling held a damp mark like a gray hand. A rope bed stood beneath the window, covered by the wedding quilt Mama had pieced from old dresses, green from my school years, brown from Anna's first winter coat. One bit of red nobody remembered. Outside, a horse stamped in the hard yard, and somewhere below us, a spoon slipped in a basin with a thin metal ring. It was cold enough that I could see a faint cloud when John breathed near the window. I wore the white nightdress with the narrow cuffs buttoned to my throat. He still had on his trousers and undershirt, and one suspender hung loose against his hip. He looked like a lost boy pretending he knew the road. He kept rubbing that left sleeve seam until the thread lifted under his nail. He said, "Your hands are cold." I tucked them beneath my arms and told him they were always cold, which wasn't true. My fingers were shaking so hard the cuff buttons clicked against each other. John sat on the edge of the rope bed, then stood again when it creaked. He cleared his throat. I watched the small hollow move above his collarbone. "My father said," he began, and stopped. I asked what his father had said, but he stared at the lamp chimney where a dead moth had burned into a brown curl. "Not much," he answered. For a moment we both laughed, a single frightened breath that sounded wrong in that room. Then the laugh died, and the quiet came back heavier. He reached for me, paused before touching my sleeve, and whispered, "We're married now." I nodded because it was the only answer I had been taught. That's the thing nobody tells you. Sometimes obedience looks exactly like agreement from across a room. His hand moved. I stopped breathing. When he touched my shoulder, my whole back tightened as though cold water had been poured down it, and he pulled away at once. "Did I hurt you?" he asked. I said no. The lie came quickly because I thought a good wife protected her husband from her fear. He tried again, slower, but neither of us knew what slow was meant to fix. I stared at the damp mark on the ceiling and counted its 5 gray points. He whispered, "Sarah?" And I said, "I'm here," though I felt far outside myself. standing somewhere near the wash line in morning sun. When pain came, plain and sharp, my knees locked and my jaw tightened, until one tooth began to throb. "Wait," I said. He froze. For one breath, maybe two, I thought the door might open, and some older woman would finally tell us what to do. Nobody came. John looked ashamed. I wanted to pull away and comfort him at the same time. He asked, "Should I stop?" So softly I almost missed it beneath the horse stamping outside. I didn't know I was allowed to answer. Anna's words sat in my head like stones. "Don't fight him. Be still." So I said, "It's all right." It wasn't. John believed me because he needed to, and I said it because I thought marriage required it. There was no cruelty in his face, only fear and the duty we had both been handed. I won't describe more. My body remembers the cold sheet beneath my palms, the rope knocking against the frame, and the iron taste where I bit my cheek. Afterward, John covered me with the quilt and whispered, "I'm sorry." I told him there was nothing to forgive. We lay facing opposite walls while the lamp hissed low. When I stood, my legs shook, so I pretended to search for a hairpin near the washstand. There wasn't one. I noticed a loose blue thread on the red quilt patch and pulled until the seam puckered. Before dawn, I understood the closed door hadn't kept our marriage private. It had kept help outside. The plain fact is that I was hurt because neither of us understood that fear and pain were reasons to stop, not tests of a wife's goodness. We had been taught duty with great care and given no words for kindness inside that duty. John had been told a husband should lead. I had been told a wife should yield. Between those two commands, there was no room for either of us to say, "We don't know what we're doing." The next morning, I carried breakfast downstairs while walking in short, careful steps. Mama glanced once at my face, then placed 6 eggs in my apron and told me the hens were laying poorly. Anna saw the way I gripped the table edge. She knew. She didn't ask. That's the fact that still catches in me. 5 married women sat within 10 feet of my chair, and every one of them understood enough to look away. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. John was as trapped by the silence as I was, though my body carried the proof of it. We didn't know that a husband could wait without failing, that a wife could say no without breaking a vow, or that closeness was supposed to be learned together instead of endured alone. The silence wasn't a hole someone forgot to fill. It was built into the walls, passed from mother to daughter and father to son, protected by blushes, jokes, prayers, and the fear of seeming unclean. Years later, I learned one plain sentence that would have changed that entire night. If one person is afraid, both people stop. I wish someone had written it on the back of Anna's recipe card. I wish Mama had whispered it over the chipped cup. Instead, the sun rose, the chores began, and I learned to carry pain without letting the milk pail shake. For the first year, I learned to move through marriage the way I moved through a dark barn, one hand out, waiting to strike wood. I learned to make myself tired before night by scrubbing porch boards with lye water until my knuckles split. I would count fence posts in my head, then hymn verses, then the brown knots in the ceiling beam. By the time our first winter came, I could leave my body without leaving the room. Mostly I stared at ordinary things and went somewhere else. A crack in the basin, 3 missing buttons on John's work shirt, the stovepipe shadow bending across the floor. I could shell peas, smile when a neighbor came through the gate, and keep one part of myself hidden behind the flower bin in my mind. I thought I had found a skill. Turns out disappearing was one of the few crafts women taught themselves. Dark humor, I know, but sometimes a small joke is the only safe candle you have. John noticed pieces of it, though he didn't know what he was seeing. Some nights he touched my elbow, felt me flinch, and sat on the edge of the bed with both hands between his knees. Once he said, "You go far away." I told him I was tired, because tiredness was allowed and fear wasn't. I loved him for stopping when he understood, and I resented him for not understanding sooner. Both were true. That's the thing nobody tells you. A marriage can hold care and harm in the same pair of hands. We built small rules without naming them. The lamp stayed lit, the door stayed unbolted, and if I folded the sheet corner into a hard little square, he turned away and asked about the cows. Years later, he admitted he watched for that square the way a farmer watches clouds. Neither of us called it a boundary. We only knew the weather had changed. By our third year, I cried only in the smokehouse, never at the table, and I called that improvement. At quilting bees, the truth came close enough to touch, then slipped beneath the cloth. Anna once stitched green diamonds beside me, while Mary Stoltzfus said, "Some nights I pray for morning." Nobody answered. Aunt Miriam's needle stopped halfway through a yellow patch. I nearly said, "Me too." My mouth shaped the first word, but Miriam asked whether Mary's youngest had stopped coughing. That was how we confessed, sideways, in pieces. 2 years later, Mary told me at the creek that she locked herself in the pantry when she was afraid. Her husband, Eli, carved toy horses and never raised his voice. "He never hit me," she said, staring at the gray water. When her mother found out, she called Mary's dread a test of faith. Mary stopped using the pantry because its latch squeaked. And then sorry, give me a second. I can still see that wet sheet twisted in her hands. 4 months later, people called another pregnancy a blessing, and Mary smiled without showing her teeth. I was 71 when I first saw the word consent printed on a page. I sat in a county clinic 3 towns from the apartment where John and I lived after leaving the settlement. The waiting room had plastic chairs the color of weak tea and a fish tank that hummed louder than the air conditioner. I picked up a booklet because the woman on its cover had silver hair like mine. Halfway down the second page was a drawing of 2 hands and 1 sentence. Consent must be freely given, and it can be withdrawn at any time. My thumb went numb against the paper. My chest tightened so fast I thought I was having another spell. A little orange fish struck the glass, turned, and struck it again. I remember thinking, no, actually, I didn't think. My body knew first. My knees pulled together, and I tasted the peppermint I hadn't yet unwrapped. I wasn't angry at first. I was sad. So sad I had to place the booklet on the chair because my hands wouldn't hold it. I thought of the girl in the white nightdress, staring at 5 gray points on the ceiling because she believed stillness was goodness. I wanted to reach back through 52 years and open the door for her. John hadn't known either. He had been a young man carrying a rule he mistook for truth, and I had been a young woman taught that silence was love. We were both prisoners of it, though the bars pressed harder against my skin. That's the thing nobody tells you. Learning the right word can bring relief, and grief walks in behind it. For months I kept that booklet in my sewing box beneath green thread and 2 bent needles. I couldn't throw it away. I couldn't leave it where anyone might see. Even freedom can feel forbidden at first. What I mourned wasn't only what happened. I mourned what might have happened instead. A pause, a question, a laugh that didn't die in the room. 2 frightened people could have learned each other without duty standing over them like a stern elder. I once tried to explain that to a nurse named Carla, who wore purple glasses and kept peppermints in her pocket. She said, "But you could have told him no." I knew she meant kindness. Still, her words landed like a locked gate. I didn't know there was a no to say. I didn't know my body could belong to me inside a promise. I had left one world, but the other kept asking why I hadn't used a door I'd never been shown. I don't even know what to call that loneliness. You stand between 2 rooms, holding the truth, while people on both sides tell you the handle was obvious. And I need to tell you this too. I miss parts of home so sharply they still wake me. I miss horses at dawn, their hooves knocking packed earth while frost shone along the fence wire like sugar. I miss bread from the wood oven, its bottom crust black in two small places because Mama always turned the pan too late. I miss my grandmother's hands when she prayed, wide hands with flour in the creases, and one crooked finger from a wagon accident. She rested them palms down on the table, as if blessing the wood itself. Sometimes I wake before sunrise expecting a harness buckle to tap against the barn wall. For one soft second, I'm home again. Then I remember why I left. Those gifts are real. I carry them. The place taught me patience, craft, and how to notice weather in an animal's breath. I am homesick for a place that hurt me, and I won't lie about either half. The harm was silence dressed as holiness. 5 words. I can say them now without hating every person who lived inside that silence. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. I know because I washed both in the same white basin. These days, I choose what stays. I bake Mama's bread, but I tell my granddaughters the names of their own bones. I sing the old hymns, but I don't use them to close a question. I still fold quilts the way Anna taught me, pressing each seam with the side of a warm spoon. But no girl in my house is told to stitch over pain. When John was dying, he held my hand and said, "I wish we had known." I told him I wished it too. Then I kissed the seam of his left sleeve, where his fingers had worried the thread all those years ago. Tenderness came late. It was still tenderness. I keep that truth beside the others. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not broken because you froze, stayed quiet, obeyed, or took years to find the words. The child you were did the best she could with the map she was given. Be gentle with her. She may still appear in a locked jaw, a held breath, or the need to sit nearest the door. None of that makes you weak. It means your body learned how to keep you here. You don't owe anyone a neat story, instant forgiveness, or proof that your pain was large enough. You're allowed to miss people who failed you. You're allowed to love what was beautiful and still name what harmed you. Both truths can sit at the same table, and neither has to leave so the other can breathe. To the one still inside, your questions aren't a sin, even when every room grows quiet around them. To the one who left, missing home doesn't mean leaving was wrong. To the one thinking about leaving, you don't have to solve your whole life tonight. Begin with one safe person and one honest sentence. To the one who's married and only now understanding why your body goes still, you aren't late. To the one who recognized herself a few minutes ago, put both feet on the floor and take one slow breath. To the one who thinks another woman's story doesn't count because no one struck her, fear still counts. And to the person who loved someone who didn't understand, your compassion doesn't cancel your hurt. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. That isn't a slogan. It is the sentence I needed at 19. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this, or which moment gave a name to something you've carried quietly. You don't have to tell the whole story. One word is enough. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started, even at 84. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, but I'm getting closer, and each one belongs to someone who thought her silence made her invisible. Stay with Rebecca Amish home if you believe quiet voices deserve room to finish their sentence. We can hold memory without turning it into spectacle, and we can name harm without forgetting the human beings caught inside it. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. Thank you for sitting with the girl I was, and with the old woman who finally learned the words. I spent decades believing silence was the price of belonging. It wasn't. Your body was always yours, even before you knew.